And we are live.
Let's go with it. You probably heard this conversation a bunch in the last few weeks. Everybody's been talking about the spawn. And that seems like it's easy to do until you get out on the water. And the concept of the spawn makes sense in theory, but when you go out there, you don't really know where to go, what you're really looking for. Maybe you don't know what baits to use. You hear people talk about sight fishing. What do fish really look like? It's hard to know unless you've actually experienced it. And so, if you're confused about the spawn, if you're confused about where fish go during the spawn, if you're just a little bit intimidated about how you can go and catch fish where you live during the spawn, what I want to try to do tonight is create some clarity on how all that goes. It's actually very easy. It's probably one of the most predictable times of the year for you to catch a bass. It's going to seem so simple. I want to break it all the way down to the simplest form possible when it comes to the spawn tonight. So that's what we're going to do. This workshop is going to be a part of our Spring Fishing Academy where we talk about nothing but catching bass during the spring. If you have questions, make sure you drop those in the chat. I'll be watching the chat pretty closely tonight. Anything related to the spawn is fair game. Now, let's talk about this before we jump into the lesson tonight. There's two things I want to tell you about. One is I'm actually going to do some brief lake breakdowns for people inside of the Straight Up Fishing app. So if you're watching on Facebook, if you're watching on YouTube right now, what we're doing is we're taking the app subscribers have the ability to submit their lakes, and we look at those lakes together and come up with a strategy to help them catch fish. And earlier today, I made a post in the community section asking some of the app subscribers to submit their lake, and I took a quick glance at their lake to look at places where I would go if I was there, where I believe fish would be spawning at. So we're going to look at that towards the end of tonight's lesson once we talk about the foundational elements of the spawn. That sound like a plan? Everybody raise your hand if you give me a round of applause like we're in church. You know how you're in church, the pastor says something not really that great and everybody starts clapping. We're gonna do that. That's what the plan is tonight, just to talk about the spawn, what to look for, where to go, what are bass even doing during the spawn. Get some clarity there. Now, second thing I want to talk about before we jump into it is I take app members fishing within the Straight Up Fishing app. If you're inside the community, every month in March we picked three people. I fished with Tom Spoljaric, I fished with Tron, I fished with Ray Brunetti at Lake Russell at our retreat a few weeks ago. So need to get some guys for April, and I want to do something a little bit different this time. Usually I just pick a random person. Sometimes I look and see who's had the most watch time in the app. Sometimes I look at the community section and just see who's the most active in the community section on the app. This time I want to do something a little bit different. This is going to require some participation from you inside of the app. If you're watching anywhere else, jump inside that. I'd love to have you there. You can join the community for free. You can just go set it up at sufschool.com right now. But this is what I want to do for this month's trip giveaway. What I want to do is I want you inside of the app to nominate at least one person, give me more than one, but one person that you think would be good for this trip giveaway besides yourself. All right, so don't be like I would be good because I got a real good hook set, and yeah, dude, I catch biggins. It ain't even about you. Shut it down. It ain't about you. I want you to nominate somebody that you've seen inside of the app that you think, man, you know what? They would really get a lot from going fishing with Brian or going fishing and learning more. Or I would like to see them fishing because usually we film some content with the people we take fishing to repost on the app. So let me know. That's going to be the challenge for you guys for the next week or so. I have a tournament at Smith Lake next week, so I'll be watching the community section while I'm at Smith Lake. So just think about that. Who do you think within the straight up fishing community would be a good place, a good person to go fishing with, and that you would like to see some content with, and just would be really valuable for them to fish? Let me know what that is, okay? All right, let's start talking about the spawn. Michael, you want to start on that first slide that we got here? I'll have to skip around. I got it on my iPad too, but I'll have to skip around just because it didn't download in order on my iPad. So this is what we're going to talk about tonight: fishing during the spawn. Listen, I make these slides and I'll make them at lightning quick speed. I'm talking about I made these mugs like, I don't know, hour and a half ago. So if it's something misspelled, bruh, I'm sorry. You know what I was talking about. Okay. Workshop overview. This is just talking about what you can expect for the next hour. Okay. Workshop overview. We're gonna just talk about fishing during the spawn. First thing we need to do, listen, I always like to get to break down the itty bitty details because so many times in fishing we just say something, we just say fish are doing something, but we just say it and actually don't know what it means. I want to talk about what is the spawn anyway. We don't really talk about that. We just say it and we know what it means for us that's been fishing for a long time. And here in the app, we got people that just started fishing a year ago, maybe months ago, all the way to tournament fishermen that have been fishing 20, 30, 40 years. So I want to break it down to the smallest bite-sized portions. And I think for us to have been fishing a long time, it's also a good idea just to remind ourselves what we're even talking about because we just get in a routine of saying things. What is the spawn? I want to talk about what that is. We're going to talk about when bass spawn. We're going to talk about where can I look during the spawn to catch bass. And then we're going to talk about what I can use to catch bass during the spawn. That sound like a plan for y'all? Let's rock with it. What's our next one? What's the first slide we got here? I think I'm going to have to look. Okay. What is the spawn? All right. Any guesses? Throw it down. Throw it down in the. I'm gonna get on the app on my iPad so I can watch the chat. What is the spawn? Okay. So, and I just copied this straight from Google because I didn't want to pollute it with my own version of what I think the spawn like. What is, I guess Google is the truth, but you know what I mean. I wanted to hear what somebody else's version of what the spawn really really is. And so this is what I found. Copy and pasted it straight from Google. This refers to the period when bass prepare to lay, fertilize their eggs, and guard the nest until the fry hatch, typically occurring in the spring when the water temperatures rise. And so, listen, you'll be careful. You'll read all of that just to be reading all that. But if you really dig into that, there is a ton of information in that sentence that will help you understand what we're about to talk about. Okay. The first thing that stands out to me, that it says it refers to a period. So please understand there is a window, and that window for when the spawn happened is different in every part of the country. And in certain parts of the country, that window lasts for longer or shorter periods of time. Okay. So we'll dig into that. If you live up north, the spawn window is very, very short. It has a lot to do with the growing season is shorter, the summer is shorter, the water temperature, which we're going to get into that. The water temperature is at the right temperature for a shorter period of time. But the further you go south, it's a longer, drawn out period of time that the fish spawn. In Florida, fish start spawning probably in November, December, and it'll go all the way to May. And the further you go up north, that window shrinks more and more the further you go north. So, period. When bass prepare, okay, prepare could be considered the pre-spawn. When they lay, that's when you see them rolling. You ever seen, for you guys that have sight fish before, lay is when they're actually putting the eggs into the nest that they prepared. You see them a lot of times rolling, bumping each other, rubbing against each other. I'm not really sure why they do that, but that is something that you will see once you start sight fishing. You'll see fish running into each other, rubbing. The male will bump the female, literally like run into her. The best I can think is maybe that helps loosen up her eggs. I really don't know. Because we know the fish aren't having actual. So why are they doing that? I don't know. Don't try it with your wife. It won't work out as good for you as it did for the bass, okay? And then they also fertilize the eggs in this period. And so the fact that there is a period for all of those three things means that timing is very important if we're going to catch these bass. So you see how there's layers of this, and it's so easy to just read that sentence and just move on because you think you know. Like when you really process what they're saying, there's a ton of information just in this one sentence. Then it goes on. They're actually talking about post spawn in this sentence. It says, and then guard the nest until the fry hatch. So there's something that happens when bass spawn. A lot of times the male does prepare a bed. They'll take their tail, and a lot of times they'll fan out a spot on the bottom. They don't always do that, but generally speaking, they'll fan out a little bare spot in the mud, the rocks, stone, whatever it is on the bottom of the lake. That's how they prepare. The female comes in, lays her eggs. The male fertilizes the eggs, and then the male stays there and guards the nest until the fry hatch, until the eggs hatch. And we're protecting for a period of time. In a lot of lakes where I live, they don't do that very often. And I do think that's very specific through experience. I think this is specific to certain species. Largemouth stay longer and guard the hatch. Spotted bass, I don't know if they guard there. I don't know if they, maybe, maybe they do. But it depends on the year. It depends on the water temperature. I've noticed it depend on what type of shad forest the fish feed on. All of that plays into factors to how long these fish stay and guard the nest. I live on a blueback heron lake. You just don't see many bucks guarding the fry. The moment that they do their business, gone, out of here. See, sayonara. See you next year. They go really fast. Another important part is in this sentence is telling you when you can expect to see all of that we just talked about. Did you catch that? The last part of this sentence tells you when you can expect to see the preparation, the laying, the fertilizing. And it's typically in the spring when water temperatures are on the rise. We're going to dive deeper into that because rise what? Rise from 40 to 50, rise from 60 to 70. There's a lot of different things there. We're going to dig into that here next. Okay, Mike, let's go to the next slide. All right. So let's say you're going to try to go fish during the spawn. Let's cover this before you can leave that right there, Michael, but let's talk about this. Actually, let's slide that out of the way just for a second because I need to address this before we move on any further because I know it's going to come up in conversation, Facebook, YouTube, MySpace, Twitter, I don't know, Black Twitter, whatever else, World Star Hip Hop, this is going to come up. Okay. Now, the conversation is going to come up. This can be controversial depending on whatever you are about fishing during the spawn. We need to talk about this before I move on any further. Listen, folks, you're not hurting your fishery by fishing during the spawn. Okay? You're not hurting your fishery. Here's why. A lot of people get upset. Obviously, these fish are reproducing during this period of time of the year. And they feel like if they take that male off, they take that female off, that hatch is ruined for the year. There's a couple things that's going to get in the way of that theory. Number one, you are seeing such a small portion of the spawn with your visual eyes by fishing during the spawn, or even if you fish on a stained body of water where you don't fish for ones that you can actually see, but the ones that the blind fishing for spawning bass, a very, very small portion. And we know that more now because of forward facing sonar. We're seeing so many fish off during the periods when we thought that fish were spawning. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but we aren't good enough. Our tools haven't reached the capacity to overpower Mother Nature just yet. You don't have to worry about that. Our fisheries and biologists put a lot of time, money, and effort behind seeing how well our fisheries are doing. And if your body of water doesn't have regulations around the spawn, you can feel very confident you're not harming that body of water. Now I know some of you live up north and the season opens at certain periods of time, certain periods of the year. You know why that is? Because they did the research, the biologists figured out, you know what, during this time of the year, we don't want you keeping our bass because we think it could hurt our fisheries. Okay, so they spend a lot of time and effort and they know this stuff. They literally spend their career, their life, and millions of dollars trying to figure this out. Secondly, I already talked about it a little bit, especially if you live on a clear body of water. You have no idea how many fish spawn much, much deeper than what you can see. And you're never going to catch them. You're simply never going to catch them. Also, please understand that if you're serious about conservation on our lakes today, a part of conservation is harvesting. And what I mean by harvesting, a part of conversation, listen to me, is killing fish, eating them. And that's okay. This is a resource that was literally put here for us to live off of. And there's very, very few people that actually harvest fish anymore at all. Bass fishing in America is largely just for sport. I bet you would be hard pressed to find more than 10% of people keeping fish. Now, here comes the other conversation, part of the conversation where a lot of people say, well, tournaments delay mortality. The delay mortality. The studies say this, the studies say that. I hear the studies. I always ask, how do you know? Nobody's ever been able to present me with any solid information. I hear hypothesis, but nobody's ever been able to present it. And I welcome for you to, if you have it, post it in the comments, post a link. And I want hard information. I want facts. Facts. We saw this many fish weighed in and we saw this many fish die. That's what you got to have. So we really have to be careful about throwing out these numbers. I've heard numbers that 8 out of 10 are delayed mortality and 5 out of this, and the numbers move around and people are just throwing out numbers, guys. We really got to be careful about throwing around numbers without meaning to them, because all we're doing is giving the activists gas to put us out of business, to take our rights away. So be very, very careful about dispersing that information if it doesn't have cold, hard facts. Not guesses. It's very important for us to be able to show proof and data that actually proves the numbers that we're putting out. All right, let's go back to the slides, Mike. Sure, everybody's pissed off about that. You clicked on the video, not me. Let's talk about what this looks like. You live somewhere where the water's clear. This is some of the stuff that you might see if you're looking for bass during the spawn. What does it look like? How do I know it? Okay, this is what it may look like. Okay, if you look at that photo in the top left-hand corner, it's pretty obvious that's a bed. That's what you may see in a pond. You can see this in a river. You might see this in a lake. It's going to look something like that. That top left, that bottom left, those are pretty clearly bass beds. Now, if you guys live in Florida, you got everything spawning down there. There's tilapia beds, there's brim beds, there's bass beds, there's everything in the world. If you live, I would say South Georgia and further south, there's a lot of different things spawning. But typically, if you live in Southeast, I guess Florida's still Southeast technically, but the other Southeast, our beds, if you see a bed or a shiny spot on the bottom, typically it's a bass. Some other places it could be tilapia and other what we refer to as trash fish. You won't always see that. It won't be always that obvious. I don't know why that is. Where I live, beds aren't very obvious. They might sit on a dark spot instead of being a light spot. where they make the bed. It might be actually a dark spot. They might make a bed on algae. They may bed on leaves, a beer can, on anything, a stump right beside a stump. You can see stuff like that, but it's oftentimes it won't be. You might just see a fish setting there. But generally speaking, those two pictures on the left is what you're going to see. And that's a dead giveaway that the fish are in the spawn period of the year if you're using your sight. Now, you can see that's what you can see that smallmouth in the top right hand corner. That's what they do. You can see he's taking his tail and he's fanning out a place, making a clean spot out so to get what you see on the left hand side. Bottom right hand slide or bottom right hand square there, you see there's two fish. Um, that's what they look like when they're making love. Okay. When they're out there getting they get on. That's what it looks like. And a lot of times, this is what I was referring to is when you see them bumping, laying, doing that kind of thing. The fish that's closest to you is most likely the male. That one behind it is the female. Somebody in the community section this week mentioned something about the color differences between the males and the females when they're on the beds. And I think he mentioned something about the females looking more translucent. And I really don't have an answer for that. I will say this. If you think in nature, everything that's a male always has a brighter color. And maybe that has something to do with it. The females always blend into the background, blend into the surroundings much better. I guess a I don't know, that's something that keeps them protected, so they don't stand out as much. And the male always has more colors, different shape. If you think about ducks, birds, even dogs, sometimes even dogs, their head shape is much different than the female. It's the only thing I can think, but I really and truly don't know. That's me making up and guessing right there. But a lot of times, what I look for when I'm looking for spawning bass, especially when you get them when they're really, really doing it pretty hard, is you'll see a flash in the water, and it's from the fish turning over like that. They do a bunch of this turning over, and you'll see that silver flash, their belly shining. It's a good indication that when you start to see that, the spawn is going on. That's what it'll look like to you. All right, let's jump to the next slide, Mike. How do we know this is happening? Okay, how do we know that bass are spawning? Okay, where I live, and I had to really think about this because I fished so long that it's almost like I walk outside and I think, and my body just starts thinking about it. I'm not gonna say I know it's happening, but there's something that happens where you put your boat in the water and you start thinking, oh man, I might need to start looking around a little bit. 2 weeks ago, we had the Tackle Rouse Invitational at Hartwell. Water was in the 50s. And we're just living in a generation where everybody's just on their electronics now. It's almost like cell phones or computers. I knew all my friends, everybody's coming to me. This is home lakes. A lot of people were talking to me about the tournament, and I was like, they'll come overnight. And they were like, oh man, there's no fish nowhere. I was like, dude, they'll come overnight. I was like, oh man, it's just the water's 58, the water's 56. It's a long way. I caught fishing 40 foot. I said, I don't care. It will happen overnight. I'll be gosh dang it. You know what happened overnight during the tournament? There was literally no fish spawning during practice. It didn't really get hotter as the tournament got there. It was just stable. 60s, I would say. 40s in the morning. It's a 60 every day. I was like, guys, it's going to happen this week any day. I was like, you better keep looking. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. Sure as the world. First day of the tournament, I get hung up. I go over there to get my shaky head off the dock. I look, and a 3-pounder eases off a bed. I turn the boat around. I go around to the other side of the dock. Another fish sitting right there on a little dark spot. And it happened literally overnight. But how do you know that's about to happen? Okay, this gets really opinionated. Everything I'm about to say is subjective to where you are in the country, to the species, to the style, type of lake it is. Everything I'm about to say is only experienced. None of it's the truth. Now, how many people you ever know say that? Everything I'm like, this window moves around a lot. Which, guys, listen, that's why you're supposed to like fishing. That's what's cool about fishing. If I could just make it to where I could just block off everything, and then that happened every single year, you wouldn't have no reason to practice. It wouldn't even be interesting. I walk, like I just said, I walk outside, you kind of start thinking about it, starting to feel a little bit like it. I got a black truck, so you can start to see the pollen on the top of the truck a little bit. You notice the dogwoods moving, the days are getting longer, and then just something about it, it just says, dude, they might be doing it. They might be doing it. They're getting ready to do it. But generally speaking, and I'm casting the broadest net over this conversation that I can possibly cast over it, just because we're trying to get some basics. We're trying to get some foundational knowledge in your brain about fishing during the spawn. I would say 60-degree water temperature plus is a good time for you to start looking. Now, make sure you listen to me. That can happen as early, the spawn can happen in the not early 50s. What's the word I'm trying to say? Not early 50s, low 50s. The spawn can happen in the low 50s. But I can guarantee you, if it's at least 60 and above in the spring, when the days are getting longer, there's going to be some bass spawning somewhere. Okay. It might be towards the tail end. It might be dead middle of the spawn, or they might be getting ready. But if it's 60 plus, good buddy, they're going to be getting bucket naked if it's 60 plus. Don't care where you are. And there's certain places, certain areas of the country with 53, 54, and it's been hovering around there for a long while. You probably better be looking. Not necessarily spawning, but you probably better be looking. How do you know it's happening? Second thing, if you start seeing bass, if you see bass sitting on the docks, if you see bass sitting in the middle of pockets, if you just see them just swimming down the bank, you're starting to visually see some fish after water's been in the 40s, low 50s, they probably are spawning. Okay. Here's another dead giveaway that I've experienced. Again, all of these bullet points are just experiences that I am sharing, not necessarily the gospel truth. This is ways that bird dog me on to knowing these fish are doing something different. It's magic time. Okay. That's all I'm sharing. A slow bite in the spring. And what I mean by that, maybe for 2 weeks solid, you've been catching them cranking. You've been catching them on a jerk bait. You've been catching them on spinnerbait, chatterbait, and then all of a sudden you go down those same banks, those same pockets, those same creeks. You've been throwing the chatterbait, the spinnerbait, all the other stuff, and then all of a sudden that ain't working no more. Don't work. It's a good chance that those fish have went to the bank, they've moved shallow. Now they're starting to spawn. Once you get to the spawn, and I saw this so many times last week, 2 weeks ago at the SUF retreat, so many. You can catch fish on crankbaits. You can catch fish on moving baits, but the water temperature just doesn't get so warm. It's such a big portion of the fish are spawning. You're going to catch less than you would if you were actively fishing for spawning fish. So when that bite slows down, and if you get, I can, at Russell during the spring, like where we went, it's nothing to catch 30 bass with bottom dragging baits, especially between two people, but really one guy can. But if you're throwing something that's moving or erratic, you might catch 10 a day. That bite slows down on the reaction stuff once they start to spawn. So if you had a bite going, you notice it starts to wane, but yet the water temperature is rising and everything in you says, oh, throw more reaction. The water temperature is rising. These fish are going to be active. As the water temperature rises in the spring, the fish get lazier. They're just soaking up the sun. I say this all the time in the app. Fish don't respond to weather the way that you and I do. In our mind, we think, oh, the water temperature is warming up. The fish want to get out and they want to chase my crankbait. Not really, man. He really just wants to set it top of water column and absorb some sunny D. That's it. Don't really want to move that much. Pollen on the water is a dead giveaway. If southeast, we got the pine pollen. It goes bananas. Them trees just be blowing us out. You see pollen on the water, they doing it, man. I done learned that over the years. I don't care how cold it is. If you see pollen on the water, they doing the nasty. Lastly, isolated targets. This is for my guys that live on stained bodies of water. Every time you pitch your worm to that, I don't know, the catwalks going to the docks, those shallow catwalks, you get a bite. They're spawning. Every time you pitch your bait straight to a stump, you get a bite. They on it. You throw your chatterbait up on a bare bank with nothing on it, and you get to turn the handle about 3 times. He yagi on it. They're probably spawning. Stained water situation, you won't always see the fish, but the bites that you get will give you hints about what the fish are doing. So pay attention to where you're getting bites. It's going to tell you a lot about what's happening beneath the water. All right, Mike, let's jump to that next slide there. Our next slide. Where can I look? Where can I look? I had to make this, I threw another broad blanket over this because obviously where you look in Florida will look a lot different than where you look in South Carolina versus where you would look on the Potomac River versus where you would look in Massachusetts versus where you would look on Champlain versus where you would look on Potholes Reservoir versus where you would look on Lake Pleasant. It can vary pretty drastically, but I tried to narrow this down to some very, very simple, fundamental places that you can look. And we're going to break this stuff down and did a couple lake breakdowns. I'm going to show you, get you some visuals of where you can look at on your home body of water so you know where bass are spawning. Where can you look? Where can you go? You're in your boat now. You're going out to the water. You're going out on the lake. Brian said I can catch fish during the spawn. He said it's the best time. Whoop, whoop, whoop. This is where I'm going. Back into pockets. I know that doesn't sound grand. Forget everything that everybody probably told you and you've read in magazines, YouTube videos. They'll talk about how fish stage on the points and then they go into the pockets and then they do this and they do that and they just work their way back. Let me tell you what they do. Especially like where I live, there ain't no staging. They're literally, remember I just told you about Lake Hartwell Tournament? They can literally be in 40 foot and then strike a lightning to the very gosh dang old booty butt naked back of the pocket. It's overnight. There's no setting up. There's no staging. There's none of that. They go to the very back end of the pockets. You know why? Why would you think they would go to the back end of the pockets first? Type that in the chat. Where you know why they go to the back end of the pockets? That water is going to warm the fastest. It don't warm the fastest after on the point where it's getting hit with 20-mile-an-hour wind every day. Because y'all know during the spring, the wind blows every freaking day, 47,000 miles an hour. Why would he go and set up out there? That don't make sense. I'm going to go to the most calm, most stable water. And I'm going to show y'all this in some of these screenshots when I do these lake breakdowns here in just a few minutes. Back ends of pockets. And more particularly, is that a word? Particularly, dead end pockets. Dead end pockets is where you want to look. Dead end means no creek. If it rains, there's no water going to run into that pocket through a little creek, a little feeder creek or anything. It's just a dead end bowl pocket. Like there's nothing feeding that. It's just a pocket. The fish will come up in the back of those pockets first. It's stable water. It's going to warm up fast. It's protected from north winds. Let me sit back here and get my life together first before I go and make these babies. All right. Main Lake Flats. This is important because some of you guys' lakes don't necessarily have a lot of pockets. Lake Pickwick, Florida, Harris Chain, Okeechobee. I'm gonna even go. I'm gonna even say this: Champlain. A lot of the small bodies of water y'all fish, there are no pockets. There's no pockets. So where are the fish going to spawn? Or if there's very few pockets, they got to spawn somewhere. You not there's 8 pockets on the lake. Every fish doesn't go in that pocket. So where do they go and spawn? Main lake flats. If you don't know what a main lake flat is, I'm going to show you in this lake breakdown here in just a few minutes. Main lake flats. All I'm talking about is anywhere on the main lake where it's extremely shallow and flat, which mean by flat, I don't mean it doesn't drop off very drastically. It's 2 foot, 4 foot, maybe even as deep as 10 foot for a very long extended distance. Fish will spawn on that. That can be points, that can be shoals, that can be reefs, that can be ledges. If you live like around Kentucky Lake or any Tennessee River Lake, those fish spawn on those shallow bars and ledges. They can't all go in the pockets. They don't have that many, they ain't got enough pockets. There ain't enough of those. They got to go spawn somewhere. They're just going to get the shallowest they can get. And a lot of times it's going to be main lake flats, main lake flat points or creek points, just a flat point. A lot of times when I'm doing lake breakdowns in the fall, we talk a lot about fishing sharp contours, where it's deepest, creek turns. We're not going to do that in the spring. We're going to do the exact opposite. A good rule of thumb for you right now, or for you guys that's further up north, as you move into this next period where the fish are spawning, is to look for flats, flat points, shoals, anywhere there's lack of contour. It's a good place for you to look. Shallow bays, bayous, shallow creeks. You notice some creeks are shallower than others. Some creeks have more flats than others. Some creeks have more shoals than others. Those are the creeks that you want to look at. Think about that on your home body of water right now. Think of somewhere you've been where you're like, God, it's kind of hard to get into that pocket. Think of somewhere where you're like, oh man, it's just when in that particular creek, you got to kind of pay attention to where you're going to get back in there. That's the creek you want to fish right now. Think about maybe we call them blow throughs, where I have some people call them little saddles. Think about a place where there's like an island, and then that island is at the right water level. You can blow through that area, but when the water's low, you can't go through there. Can you think of a place like that? And can you think of a place where maybe there's willow bushes if the water's high enough, but if the water's too low, you can't get back there. Go back there now. That's where you want to go. Anywhere is flat. Anywhere if the water drops a few feet, that's going to be out of the water, or you can't fish that. It's not accessible. That's what I'm talking about by shallow bays, bayous, creek turns, reefs, any of those places where if the water levels is just not right, it's not fishable or not navigable. Right now, I want you to go there and try fishing there. So think about that for where you live right now. Just think about that just for a second before you type any comments or I'll move on to the next thing. Just think about where you would go in your body of water, where you would experience that. That's where you're going to go look this weekend. That's where you're going to look next time you go fishing. Okay. How about before we jump to this next slide, should I answer a few questions that do we have questions in the I see comments. I don't know if I see questions, which sometimes means I'm doing a good job. I see a lot of questions that either means a couple things. Either I'm doing a good job or y'all ain't interested.
I'm seeing
One of the two.
I'm seeing a couple, but I think you're gonna get to them.
Then we're going to get so what prey is the biggest threat to fry? Let me ask this one. Ken Pfeiffer. Oh, I love this question, Ken. Ken Pfeiffer says, what prey is the biggest threat to fry? So that's going to be subjective to probably the body of water. I want to speak in the context of I want to give my small water guys. Is there anybody in the community that does a lot of pond fishing? And if it works this way in ponds, I guarantee it works this way in bass. I mean, in lakes, rivers, etc. You know what the biggest threat to fry in a pond situation? My son and I, we've been doing a lot of pan fishing the last 2 years for some local ponds, and the owners they want us to take out as many crappie as possible, as many panfish as possible, but more particularly crappie. This is why. Crappie are absolutely detrimental. I'm talking about as bad as roaches to a pond. Their fry hatches so early that crappie fry matures enough that when bass spawn, the crappie fry is big enough to consume the bass fry. The crappie fry is big enough to consume the bass fry. I think I said that right. So crappie spawns so early in the season that, and I don't think they need to make beds either. I think crappie get one on top of one another and just spawn almost like salmon do. I think they just put their eggs out in the water column and they just fertilize in the middle of the water column. I don't think they're spawning on anything. I think that's got to be what's going on. So they can spawn anywhere, limitless. And they spawn so early that by the time that egg hatches and matures, it's mature enough to eat the bass fry when it hatches. So they can absolutely decimate a pond. So you need to control the crappie and the bluegill too, but more importantly, the crappie. The bluegill spawn a little bit later. They need a little bit of warmer water temperature, so their fry is a little bit smaller. It's probably along the same lines of when bass hatch. So crappie, number one, is a detriment to the bass population. Okay, now that's in a pond situation. You'd have to think that's going on in a lake as well. But here's the thing that we have working for us in the lake is we have other predators for crappie. Striper will knock the sides off of him. Go ahead, crappie. Come on out here. I'll eat you. Okay, you got bass that will eat crappie. You've got catfish that will eat crappie. You got everything. Crappie's going to be not at the top of the food chain. Bass, probably striper, and where I live is probably gonna be striper, bass, and then everybody else on the food chain. When you go up north, you got other things to eat. You got muskie and sturgeon and all these other fish with big teeth that'll eat fish. So I don't think they're at the top of the food chain. But where in the southeast, I would say the bass are at the top of the food chain. However, the crappie panfish is the biggest threat to fry. And you'll notice that if you're ever sight fishing, you'll see bass. I just filmed a deal Friday, sight fishing on Lake Hartwell, and you could see the fish running brim off the bed, running brim off the bed. And sometimes you don't even see the brim. You'll see them just like scurry off, and you're like, I don't even see anything. But by far, the biggest threat to bass fry is panfish. Let's see here. Okay, let's just jump to the next slide. I'm like you, I don't really see questions, I see conversation, which I love. Y'all go ahead, conversation up. And then let's jump to that. I don't remember what my next slide was about. Okay, so now I'm going to start showing you areas to target. Is there not one more slide before, like one more like bullet point slide before that, Mike? Is this it? I just jumped straight to this. It's okay. I just can't remember if it is. It might be. I just can't remember. Yeah,
that was the.
Yeah, that's it.
That was
okay,
the one before.
That's all right then. That's all right. I forgot what I was talking about. That's all. All right. So what you're about to see now is I'm just going to show you some examples, real life examples, point of view. We're going to look at some aerials too. I'm going to give you some examples of where you can start thinking about. Because when I know fish are spawning, I literally have a visual in my mind of where I'm going to fish, what kind of pockets I'm going to fish. I got a visual in my mind, even in stain water, like I'm visualizing this bass spawning beside trees, bushes, flats. Like I literally can picture it. And that image that I have ingrained in my mind has come from sight fishing so much. Because I live where the water's clear. Y'all came here for the retreat and you saw how clear the water is. Since I've lived up and grown in that environment and I've seen where bass actually spawn at, even when I'm in stained water, I now have that engraved in my mind, and I literally feel like I can see where bass are spawning, even if it's in a stained situation. So if you live on a place like this, the Jordan Lake is one that we did a breakdown on today. Lake Greenwood, where it's stained water, anywhere where it's stained dark brown water, tannic water. Look at these three targets that I've highlighted here. This would be something that you could look at if you were trying to catch fish during the spawn. Remember, bass during the spawn, they always like to be beside something. Pre-spawn, they like to be beside something if they can. Now, here's the thing, a lot of our lakes, there's not enough stuff for them to be beside, but a good place to start is somewhere where they can be beside. Cypress trees. Now, how many of you in this community have a lake? It's like swampy, has standing timber, cypress trees, buck bushes, any of that kind of stuff. If you got any of that, I'm talking to you right now. We already know the deal on cypress trees. You know, cypress trees, they have a bunch of knees. Now you see that trunk of that tree, but there's all kind of stuff all around that tree. There's knees. If the water is drained, you'd see the root system of that tree, and bass will spawn on that. So if I was fishing this pocket, the first thing I would see would be that cypress tree, and I would make multiple casts around the base of that tree. I would skip something straight up there to the base of the tree. I'd skip to the left, I'd skip to the right, I'd skip to the front, I'd skip to the back, and then I would start branching out 2 to 3 foot from the base of the tree because there's all kind of little things around it as well, all kind of roots and knees around that tree. You see the green arrow in the center. That is just some type of buckbush, some type of, I don't know, just like a little piece of wood. Don't matter what kind it is. I ain't got to name it for you to know it. I see it. And I know what's going to be beside that little piece of wood. Old good buddy laying up there having a party. They having a freak off. That's what they doing. That's a good place for you to skip your weightless, your fluke, flip a creature bait. Just the bait that I'll use depends on how deep the water is. This is in the context of stained water. If the water visibility was 8, 9, 10 foot, none of this plays a factor for me for the most part. Not fishing it the way that I just spoke about. I may go up there and sight fish, but generally speaking, the clearer the water, the deeper the bass will spawn. The more stained the water, the shallower the bass will spawn. And that just goes in general. More stained bodies of water, the fish are going to live shallow. The clearer they are, the deeper they're going to go. All right, you see that where I circled the white circle on the right? You're probably looking at that and like, where are you circling? What's going on? What's out there? Well, there's nothing. There ain't nothing. It's just a flat pocket. And during this time of the year, you can just fan cast. You can look for, if you get over there, you'd be able to see, I don't know, just some little dark spots, a little sandy spot. You might see a little bit of grass on the bottom. You might see a stick laying across the bottom. That's where the fish will be spawning in a flat like that. So it's easy in a tournament situation. Somebody's always going to see the cypress tree and they're going to see that buckbrush over there. But over there to the right, it could be something a little bit more conspicuous that you could fish for. And if you use the right baits, which is fan casting weightless baits, stick baits, flukes, dragging a Carolina rig, that would be an area that you could do that. Learn how to fish those areas that don't have the very obvious targets to it. The isolated targets are a good place to start, give you a base for that area, but don't be afraid to look in these places like this where it's a little bit more hidden and you got to look for. This is just something I learned from sight fishing in clear water. Those flats where there's nothing on them, bass use those, and they use the bottom contour in those type of areas. All right, Mike, next one. Okay. Anybody know where this is? It's in South Carolina. This is Lake Hartwell. I'm pointing to a couple things on this one. Y'all remember me talking about, we call them blow-throughs here in South Carolina. If you fish a body of water that has spotted bass on it, if you fish a body of water that has smallmouth on it, largemouth, maybe. But primarily speaking, this is when I see something like this, if it's got spotted bass in it, this is where I would look for spotted bass during the spawn. If y'all came to Lake Russell back this 2 weeks ago when we had the SUF retreat. These are the kind of places where you catch them at. They own this. If that water's in the 60s, they there, cuz. They there. They ready for you. They waiting on you. They like them little chihuahuas. They like them dogs in the fences that bark real loud but can't do nothing. They sitting on this stuff ready to eat your worm, shaky head, Ned rig, Carolina rig, any kind of soft plastic you can get down there on the bottom. They're ready to eat the panties off of it. Okay, Bobby, they ready to eat this. They ready to tear it down. You see that red arrow is pointing to this little bitty flat point on that island. Please remember, we're going to talk about this a little later in the lake breakdowns. Anytime you have an island in spotted bass or smallmouth, they're going to be around that this time of year. They like to be closer to the main lake. They like to be closer to deep water, and almost always islands, shoals are closer to deep, open main lake water. So they're going to spawn around this stuff. You see now that yellowish green circle, chartreuse circle I got right there, that is marking the saddle in between those two hot spots. That saddle is a grade A 1000% you got him, you got spot that you need to be fishing. They get on that stuff because it's just a consistent flat 2 foot, 3 foot, 5 foot, I don't know, but it's consistently flat. If you got smallmouth, you got spotted bass, they use that kind of stuff. And I'm talking about the little chartreuse greenish looking circle right there beside the red arrow. Now, look in the bottom left-hand corner. You see that that white circle there? You see that extremely flat point. They will spawn around that as well. Now, you're probably thinking, well, why wouldn't you go in that pocket? Well, you could go into the pocket. But remember, all species of bass spawn, and we can target them by just knowing where they live. And you know, the smallmouth and spotted bass traditionally just like to live towards the main lake. They're sight feeders. They like the clear water. They survive better in the clear water where they just roam around and eat pelagic bait fish. And so when they move to spawn, they're not going to go back as far as largemouth. Not saying they don't, but largely speaking, there's no absolutes in bass fishing. Largely speaking, the biggest population is going to be close to the main lake. And so we want to look on these main lake shallow spots like what you see here. Okay, let's go to the next one, Mike. Everything we're going to see from here on out is pretty much visuals. And then I'm going to start breaking down you guys' lakes. And I'm going to move kind of quick through these last few here, okay? Throw your comments in the comment section. Get them quick because I'm going to burn through these. I can also post a link somehow. Michael, we can post a link somehow where they can get these slides if they want to, right? Somehow.
Yeah,
I don't know how.
We can do that.
We can
I
figure it out.
set it up so that they can download it as a PDF when I republish the video.
Yeah. I mean, anybody wants that, if we get, I don't know, 5 or 6 people in the chat that wants that, we'll do it. I don't want to go through the trouble if 2 people want it. I guess I should. I'll take that back. If 1 person wants it, we will send it to you because that's just how we are. Okay? We got you. Okay. This is a pocket. Hey, Eric, if Eric Zenke's watching, this is Lake Lanier right here. It's a few years back. This is back in 2018 or 2019. Couple places I would look. This is at the back end of a pocket. This would be somewhere I would look as soon as they spawn. Okay, you see that green arrow on the left? You got all that grass. That's probably that dog fennel. I'd get over there and I'd look. I actually, first of all, no, I wouldn't go over there and look. I would actually fan cast that to it before I can. Because a lot of times you can catch them easier if you'll just take your time, be a little bit easy, leave some distance between where you think a fish is and where you are. You can catch them a lot easier with a stick bait or a shake head, or any kind of plastic you can throw over there to it. I'd probably give myself some distance and try to catch him without looking at him first. After I made 2 or 3 casts, then I'd probably ease over there, then start looking for some bids. They'll bed in the center of that stuff because that gives the fry somewhere to hide once it hatches. Now I'm not going to limit it to that on the left. I would also look on the right. You notice how on the right you can see where it's extremely shallow over there on the right. The more shallow it is, the more it's just going to put you in a better position to be able to see the fish. However, just remember the shallower the fish is, the more spooky he's going to be, and the more distance you're going to have to create between you and that fish. So the distance that I can leave when I'm sight fishing between the fish and myself has a lot to do with the water depth. Okay. Jump to the next one, Mike. Okay, now what I did today was I asked some of the members in the Straight Up Fishing app to submit their lakes, and then I would just kind of look at them and see some good places for you to fish right now. If you're going that lake tomorrow, this is some places that would catch my eye. So I just kind of briefly looked at them, and this is what I came up with. I think I did about 5 lakes. I picked out 5 of you guys' lakes. We had about 14 submitted. I'd love to start doing this a little bit more often. If this is something you'd like to see more often, throw that in the comments or in the community section, or throw your lake in the app. Throw your lake in the Ask BLAT. Ask BLAT is for me to it's for me to serve y'all. So if you're like, hey, I would really like you to look at this lake and tell me what you think. I'm not getting it. Put it in Ask BLAT. That's what it's all about. That's what it's for. It's been a little bit slow in Ask BLAT. So if you got something you're struggling with, that's what that platform is for. Then when I answer that all in one on a podcast, which I haven't filmed one in a while, but I am going to film one this week. Then I ask you guys to talk about that. I'm trying to wait on Brennan to come and film one with me. So first one we're doing, this is Tron Foster submitted Lake Bowen. And I haven't been to Lake Bowen, which I think makes this breakdown even more better. Okay. Because I've never been there before. I do want to go fish there one day. But this is very simple. If I was going to Bowen right now, I would troll right around the ramp. So you can see the ramp is right there below the words Bowen. That's the boat ramp. That pocket right behind there on the other side of the bridge, I would go in there. It's very flat. You can actually see, if you look on Google Earth, you can see that pocket's flat. You can see some of the bottom. And then you see that red circle right there on the next point around. That point is very flat as well. And I think the next slide, if I'm not mistaken, I may have zoomed in on those areas so you could see the shallow areas that I was talking about. But those 2 pockets are flat. Everything I've been talking about this whole in workshop has been about flats, flat, flat, shallow, 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 flat, flat, flat. If you can just get that part, I think you'll start to catch more fish this spring. All right, let's jump to the next one. Okay, this is still on Bowen. And I picked this pocket. I thought this would be a good place to show it. And I probably should have zoomed out a little bit, Tron, so you can get some context of where I'm at. I'm pretty sure I'm still right there around the ramp. Because right there around the ramp, this honestly was where it looks like it was the best looking pockets. But I like this pocket. Can you guess why? Just by looking at it? I like this pocket because it's dead end. You see how there's no creek feeding it? It's almost like it's just a dugout cereal bowl or something. Like just a mud puddle. I like those pockets in the spring. See how it's just straight, just dead ends right there. I would fish that entire pocket. That would be a good one. Remember, the dead end pockets have stable water. They don't get that new fresh water when it rains like it's just did about 18 inches in the last 2 days. So that water is going to be stable. It's going to warm real fast. So bass will use that to spawn in. The water is going to be clear, so it's just going to put you in an advantage to fish it. So if you're out there on Bowen, Tron, look for those dead end short pockets. It'd be a good place for you to catch them right now. All right, Mike, next slide. I think this one was some stuff on the main lake, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so I very strategically marked this area. You see where the white line is? I think that would be, I know Bowen has some spots in it now, and that's something that I would target. It's from that point on the left all the way to this point down on the right. I'd put my trolling motor down and I'd fish all of that. I love those flat main lake they're not even flat main lake banks during this time of the year to catch big spots. They spawn on that stuff. You got a little bit of docks on there, so they got everything they need. They got close access to deep water. There's docks there, so they can use those docks to spawn on. They can use those docks to pre-spawn on, and then when they fish spawn, they can actually resuscitate themselves with the shade that's on the docks. Everything they need is on stretches like that. Now you notice I didn't pick the bank up, just north of there, that line. I didn't pick the bank just right because that's the only one where there's an extended stretch of flat bank. That'd be a good place for you to fish right now. Tie the SMH head on with a fatties, SMH worms, and you go down that bank right there. You'll catch you some fish. Promise you. All right, we can jump to the next one. I think it's like maybe 8 or 10 slides, guys. So all right, this lake is Jordan Lake. I saw two people. I know Tim Dodson and maybe one other person submitted Jordan Lake. And so pretty much the same concept. These next couple slides I tried to give you a zoomed out version for Jordan. So I'm highlighting two things in this particular slide. This is just the back end of a creek. Tim, you can put in the chat, or if you want to, you may not want to, where this is on the on Jordan. I probably should have highlighted the name of the creek to give you more context, but chances are if you fish the lake pretty often, you probably know where this is. Two things that I saw in this that really caught my attention. So you see where the red arrow is, that is a big flat, and there was a lot of what looked to be timber, bushes, or woods scattered out all across the back end of that flat. Now, I know for a fact that, or it's really a creek, the back end of this creek, I know that fish are going to be using that to spawn with. It does have a little bit of a run into it, so the water won't be that stable, but it had too much wood, too many bushes and sticks and stuff. That would be a place feel certain there would be some fish at right now, is where that red arrow is. And then where I circled up top, I picked that out because obviously, if in the event that you had some type of rain situation or downpour, up there at the top, that water should stay a little bit clearer because of the way that the water should flow out of there. And it's dead ends. See how it's got that bridge riprap on it? Like if you were to have a cold front where that little bit of riprap is, I guarantee it's just a foot or two deeper. So you could like throw a crankbait, you could throw a chatterbait down the side of that riprap. And on the side right there where I circled, that'd be a good place for fish to spawn too. So you got like a double-edged sword there. I could throw my crankbait, I could throw a chatterbait up against this riprap. Then I also could go, I could fish for spawning bass, flipping the wood, flipping the laydowns. The bass will bite a chatterbait during the spawn too in that dirty water, spinnerbait, chatterbait. Those are places that I would fish if I was going to Jordan. I think there's two more slides on Jordan. Maybe one zoomed in next. Let's see. Mm-hmm. So this is the same pocket. I just zoomed in on it, and that arrow is pointing to a lot of that wood that it looks like that in bushes that's out in the middle of the back end of this creek. Bushes are really, really good to fish if the lake has it this time of year. Bushes, lily pads, bushes, any of that kind of stuff is going to be. I would look for that on a body of water that had dirty water, stained water, which I believe Jordan is that type of lake. The biggest thing is that's a big flat. Those bass know it could be fish that on Jordan that are potentially born there and live there their entire life, potentially in a creek like this. Okay, jump to the next one. Okay, still in that same creek. Okay, this is still in the same creek, but I'm just pointing to a different section of that creek on Jordan. And this also gives you a more broad area so you can tell where this creek is. And that red arrow is pointing to that dead end pocket there. Now, why did I like the dead end pocket? You remember I talked about the back end of that creek could potentially blow out if you had some type of storm come through. Now, what would you do in a tournament if you found fish in the back of that dead end at the back of that creek, but yet we had a storm coming and it blew out? Well, sometimes the fish don't bite back there sometimes. But I would just bump out just a little bit, and you see this little dead end finger there. It ain't much to it, but that's enough to go in and get you 3, 4, 5, 10 bites. And the fact that it's dead end, the fact that it would be protected from storm water that would be coming into the lake, the runoff. The way that creek is positioned, it should, you should, it'd be less turbulent water in there. The way it's parallel to the creek. I'll look for places like that this time of the year. It's going to be protected from the winds, going to be protected from the new water that's coming into the system, and it's dead end, so it's going to warm up faster. It's going to be more stable water. Little dead end pockets like that. That's what I like to look for. Okay, I think we jump to the next lake after this. Still Jordan. Let me see here. This is another dead end pocket. Oh yeah, that all I'm just highlighting there is a dead end pocket where that red arrow is. Now, on the contrary, I wanted to show you a place that I would be least likely to expect a bite. Go back to that one again, Michael. I want to show you where I would be least likely to expect one. So you see the red X. Now that slide is a little darker. And so where the red X is, that you can see where that creek, that is not a dead end. That creek probably runs a long way back up. I don't necessarily think that's my number one grab. That doesn't mean that you won't find a creek that has a run into it where you'll catch fish this time of year. But what I'm saying is, generally speaking, casting a broad net over the entire idea of spawn, I would rather not fish that area where the X is, where you have a creek and turbulent water come in. I like this dead end area that I have the arrow pointing to there. Okay. We can jump to that next one now. Am I still on Jordan on this one? Or we move lakes. Okay, this is a closer look to that dead end pocket that I circled there. That's all it is, just giving you a closer look to of the kind of stuff that I like to see. I did the same thing on Lake Russell when we were here. A lot of the pockets that I fished were dead end, closer to the main lake, and it doesn't have a creek coming into the back of it. It would just be something like if I was walking the bank, I would be able to walk around the entire thing shoreline fishing. That's what I mean by dead end. Okay. Tweak and keep on going.
And Brian, just
okay.
Yep. These slides, I've got them now. They can download them from this live right now. They'll probably have to refresh their browser. But
holy smokes,
they're available for download as a PDF right now.
Did y'all hear that? Michael with the goods. That's some freaking space age. So if y'all want the PDF of these slides, you can download them straight from the app somehow. How are they doing it, Michael? Just is a link in the comments?
It'll show up. It's like just below the video. It's got a little arrow to the resources, and you can hit download.
Perfect. So if you want this PDF and you want if you see your lake in here, you should be able to see these spots. I think most of y'all will be able to notice where you are. Or where I'm highlighting, and it's just areas like this. I want to give you a visual of the areas, places like this. Doesn't have to be that very creek, that very pocket. Not necessarily, potentially, but areas that look like this, that have the same characteristics, the idea behind it. Remember, we want to come up with processes, because if I get a process, I can duplicate it. But if I give you a spot, once you fish that spot, it's over for the rest of your life. I want to give you a process. So think about how this could apply in other places of your lake. Now we're jumping over to the West Coast, to the other end of the earth. This lake never ceases to amaze me how different it is from anything I've ever seen in my life. This is Potholes Reservoir in Washington State. And so this is from our guy, Bryce. It's in the community. Man, first of all, Bryce, I really appreciate you being a part of the community from freaking Washington, man. That is awesome. I really don't take that for granted at all. That somebody from the other, as far away from me as almost possible, is in our group. So I really, really appreciate you being an active part of the community as well. This is Potholes Reservoir. I'm supposed to do a lake breakdown on this. And every time I look at it, I'm just like overwhelmed. I'm like, what the heck is this going on? But Potholes Reservoir does have a couple places that look to me what would be normal. And Bryce, you can let us know in the comment section if you hear on the live tonight, like what do you what are the hot sections of the lake for you? Is it the places that look normal, like what I'm highlighting here, or is it the actual potholes section of the lake that's actually really good? So I was looking at this. This is pretty close to where the launch is on potholes, and I thought this area right here had a lot of interesting things going on. And I'm going to highlight in the next few slides. I stayed on this. I guess this would be the southern portion of it, the southeastern portion of the lake, if I'm thinking right. That's what the next few slides are. Now you see this where I circled that green circle there. I think that would be a good place for. I think potholes has smallmouth in it, and where you look has a lot to do with the species that's in the lake. I like that little flat right there. I think that'd be a good place for fish to spawn for a couple of reasons. That's protected, that's shallow, and it's right there close to the main lake. That's everything you need for a smallmouth bass. Okay. So that's why I picked that area. I would look for areas like that all over the lake. Notice it's a dead end. Notice that it's shallow, and notice that it's close to the main lake. That little bay right above it would be good too, just to the north, to the top left side of it. That would be a good place. It'd be fair too. But I like this because I can tell there's some type of bottom transition, bottom rock here. There's some type of rock on the bottom too. So I think that would be a high probability of some fish using that area to spawn. All right, Mike, that next slide, I think I'm going up the river on this one. This is a good one to point out. Yes. Okay, now, place like potholes, I can imagine that the lake levels fluctuate pretty drastically. So you see that island that I circled? And more specifically, I don't know why it shows to say particular right there. More specifically, do you see that there is a behind the island, like on the bottom side of the island, that little lane there? I like that area because obviously the water is going to be entering the system up top. You see where the river comes in, and that little area will be protected from the current. It's just a current break. Now, smallmouth love current, and they'll go the current and they go to open water. This is two favorite places for them to be. That's why they got them old big tails. They do good in current. That's why they jump so high. Okay, but when they spawn, they want to be just out of that current, close to the current. And so right behind that island is going to be a nice little safe place. The water is going to be nice and stable right there. In the event when you do get a storm, that water is going to be fairly clear right there in the area. I would look around in the area, in anything right in that region right there. You see there's a couple little shallow bays right in there, but that area right behind the island just really sticks out to me because I can imagine there'll be a lot of different little bottom transitions right there. There's going to be a lot of little shallow flats right there. So that area just sticks out to me, and that would be a place that I would go and investigate first thing if I were going to this lake, during the spawn. Okay, Mike, we can jump to our next one. Is the chat working? Mine hadn't updated in a while, or people just aren't talking one. Mine hadn't updated. I'm gonna close mine out and start all over again. Okay, we're still on potholes right here. Now, this is some good stuff that I thought on potholes. Okay, so I want you to look at this, Bryce. There's two places that I highlighted. I guarantee you this fish on here. Let me know if this is a section of the lake that you fished very often. Really, honestly and truly, I would spend a whole day in this area. But there's two spots on this particular slide that I thought were really good. All right, when you look at it, let's look at that red arrow first. The red arrow, I picked that for obvious reasons, and the obvious reason is that's a dead end pocket. And you look where the river comes in right there, that's going to be protected from all the rainwater and all the stuff that's going to be happening in the spring with storms and so forth. So I would definitely check out that entire creek arm right there. Now, there's a bunch of things going on right there in the area that I want to talk about, and that's what I highlight in the next slide. This slide I zoomed out, and the next few slides I'm going to zoom in. But you see the chartreuse green one? There's a huge like gravel bar point flat thing, reef type deal there. Dude, I'm fishing that. I'm dragging the Carolina rig. I'm dragging the shaky heads. I'm dragging football jigs across that, drop shots, all the stuff that smallmouth like to eat when they're spawning. I would really scour that point and look for bottom transitions, boulders, different types of rocks. I think rock is probably a big deal for potholes. So let's jump to that next slide. I think we just zoom into it. Okay, yeah. So I zoomed into it. You can see how that red arrow is just highlighting the fact that that's a dead end pocket and it's flat. We're gonna fish that all day. There's gonna be fish in there. Bryce, I ain't never been to potholes. I know it's bass in there. Let me know if there is or not. Now, you see the white box that I squared off there? That right there is a hot spot too, because look where it's at the mouth of that river, the mouth of that creek, but you got the shallow bar. It's nothing but a shoal. So even though this is a lake all the way across the country, that is the same thing that I fished at Lake Russell. That's the same thing that I fished when I did the top 10 at Lake Hartwell a few weeks ago. Catching fish on spawners close to the main lake, on main lake bars, shallow spots, reefs, shoals. I don't care what word you use to describe it, it's all the same thing. But that little area right there, that bar at the mouth of that creek, they're gonna spawn on that stuff where it's shallowest. Okay. So look for that. Even though this is at Washington State, this same concept will work on some of you guys' other lakes where you live in the southeast and the northeast, wherever you live. The same concept will work there. Okay. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so this is zoomed in on that first spot that I talked about there. So you can just see all the little ditches and drains around that huge peninsula on the island. You can see how all that it's basically just a big shoal, a big reef. You know there's going to be fish around that, whether it be on the back side of that point where they can be protected from the current, whether it's on the front side. Sometimes smallmouth just do weird stuff, dude. Smallmouth just get out. They'd be like, I'm gonna get out here in the middle of 10-mile-an-hour current and make a bed and just fight the current for my life. That's why they're so strong. They got muscles built up in their pectoral fins or something. But that whole bar is worth investigating on. Use your side scan to look for boulders. Use your side scan to look for different types of bottom right there. Or better yet, just get out there and just fish it. If you've seen the lake at different levels, I'm sure you'll know what's out there as well. That whole area right there is worth fishing, Bryce, if you're watching this. Okay, we can go. Next one. Which lake is this one? Is this one? I can't let me look. Let me screw that in. I can't. Can you see what that one is, Mike? I can't. Oh, Greenwood. This is great. How do I not know? This is my home lake, Lake Greenwood. Okay. This is what I like about this. This is the only lake on all of these breakdowns that I'm doing right now that I've actually fished a bunch. As a matter of fact, the biggest limit of bass I've ever caught has come out of those three pockets, those two pockets you see in the top left-hand corner. I caught 26, 26 yaka in 2011, including a 9-pounder in them two pockets in the top left-hand corner. Now, one thing, Greenwood has evolved tremendously since I caught those fish. It's not the same lake that it was back then. And a lot of stuff that I learned at Greenwood has changed. Greenwood has been a victim of spotted bass takeover. And so you have to adjust the way you fish accordingly, which is why I'm about to show you 3 different places. Now, that being said, of course, there's still going to be largemouth in the lake, but it's getting to the point where you're now fishing for spotted bass on Lake Greenwood. The same rules apply. Everything that I told you about Norman, everything I told you about Russell, everything I told you about potholes is going to apply to Lake Greenwood now. And the reason I highlighted these areas that you see highlighted is for one reason. They all have a dead end. If you can't remember anything else, I've talked for an hour and a half now. I'm over my limit. My kids are in the bed. I didn't have to say that, but whatever. Looking for some sympathy. Dead ends. Shallow dead ends. If you can just get that part, your life is going to be a lot easier for the next few weeks. Those pockets that I highlighted right there, most all of them dead end. Some of them I also highlighted, that one with the red arrow. I also highlighted because Greenwood does have a tendency to blow out in the spring when we get a lot of extreme rain. And so that creek just to the left of that red arrow would be one that would be good to fish because the current is coming from, it's coming from up the lake, flowing down, and that creek lays more adjacent to the river, which means it won't get all that turbulent water going back in the creek. It's gonna stay a little bit cleaner. It's gonna stay a little bit more stable. It's a good place to fish. As for those other pockets in the top right hand, the top left hand corner, they're just good pockets, man. Good pockets. No docks in there. There's a lot of wood, just little laydowns in there, and they're extremely flat, which most of the pockets on Greenwood are flat. So all three of those areas highlight three things: dead ends, flat, flat pockets, and then that one creek lays adjacent with the mouth facing south. South facing pockets are good, especially if you live on a body of water that's likely to blow out. Okay, jump to that next one, Mike. Okay, same thing here. Okay, so this is Lake Greenwood, and this, if you're watching, um, I think Nathan Sipes pointed out this, asked for this lake breakdown. Nathan, if you're watching, I'm pointing, this is the mouth of Hidden Lake. That is, if you know how you go under the bridge to go in the Hidden Lake, you can see the bridge right there. If you just go in that straight into the back of that dead end pocket there, that's a good place to fish. It's a great place to fish. It's another dead end pocket. That water tends to stay very clear in the spring, or clearer. It doesn't look like it in that particular photo, but it's still going to be clearer than it would be in Hidden Lake. And a lot of fish go into that dead end pocket. In the back of that pocket, there's a lot of wood, laydowns, stumps, stuff that are pushed up in the middle of that flat, and they spawn on that. The biggest reasons, two main reasons I like those two pockets: it's flat back there, same depth always across. It's not really much of a creek channel. Secondly, um, I like the way it dead ends, and then also it's adjacent to the river channel, so it doesn't, it's always a little bit clearer back there in the back of that pocket. That's why I choose those. You can take that concept, duplicate it all over the lake. All right, let's jump to this next one. I think this is Arizona. So somebody put, I think it was Lake Pleasant. I hope this is the right Lake Pleasant, because I've spent about an hour of my 2 hours on this lake trying to understand it, doing a little bit of background knowledge and figuring out where I would fish on it. Because when I look on the map, this looks like a desert lake, which I guess Arizona, that makes sense. So on desert lakes are a little bit foreign to me. I have actually never got to fish a desert lake, but since I've consumed so much fishing content over the years, I have seen tournaments fish there, but never during the spawn. And so, like I mentioned to y'all, I've always look at fishing as a process, and I take those processes and I duplicate them and I use them in everywhere I go, everywhere I fish. And so, what have I been saying? Dead ends. I'll talk about islands. I'll talk about shallow shoals, reefs, bayous, points, pockets. And so I went to this lake that I've never been to before, and it's about as far different from anything I've ever fished. And I applied that process to catching fish during the spawn, and this is what I came up with. This is Lake Pleasant in Arizona, I'm pretty sure is where it was. The reason I picked this out is, can you tell how where I circled is obviously more shallow and flatter than that little creek just below the red circle? You notice how much more dark you see in that little creek below it. But when you look at where I circle that, it's very flat and it dead ends. Where the other little creek has, you can see where the water rises, probably drains in there. That's somewhere I would look. And then that's also an island. If you have a big island anywhere, there's a group of bass that is born, they eat, they live, they die by that island. And so I like to target places like that. It's a guarantee they don't leave the island. Everything they need is right there. But the main thing I want you to pay attention is the reason that I circle that area. It's flat. It dead ends. It's flat and it dead ends. Okay, let's jump to the next slide and just a few more here, and then or it should be done. Okay, so on the subject of islands, how many of y'all live somewhere where you do have islands that you could fish? Do many people have that? I don't know how that is. This is an island in the middle of Lake Pleasant, and what I liked about this island is I see points, I see flats, I see coves, I see like reefs all around this one island. And so a bass has everything it needs to live through the whole season around this island. Take me there, buddy. Whoop, whoop, put it in gear, throw it on pad. I want to go there because that area has everything. Look at little pockets. You see the little points. And we're just looking at the visual. We don't even have like the mapping and looking at what kind of reefs and things stick out from there. That right there is going to be good. And on these desert lakes, I've never been to one, but I can imagine on a desert lake, you want to be somewhere where these fish have access to deep water all the time because those lakes can fluctuate literally 30, 40, 50-foot fluctuations in water. So imagine if they're in the middle of the lake on an island, they're always going to have water. It's the most stable environment on the entire body of water because it's in the middle of the lake. So they can spawn there, they can eat there, they can live there, they can summer, they can hibernate, they can cold, they can hot, they can do everything in between around that island. There's going to be everything food wise that's in that body of water is going to be around that entire island. So I would go out there to that island. I would find where it's shallowest, where I could find the shallowest rock at, where I could find the flattest pockets around that island, and I would fish that. I would use shaky heads, I'd use crawls, I'd use not crawls, I'd use shaky heads, I would use my NIDs, the drop shots, swim baits around that island. I think that'd be a good place to fish. Okay, what we got next? Okay, this one's a good one. I think these next two slides are pretty good, and I think this should be it. Okay, so this is the back end of a creek / pocket on Pleasant. And I very strategically circled that little creek right there because obviously we can see where the water is going to enter that creek at the back right there. You can see how that juts off to the side. It's protected from any of the turbulent water, rainwater, runoff that's going to be entering that creek. And it's flat. You can obviously tell that is the flattest pocket in close proximity in that creek. And the fact that that pocket is as flat as it looks means there could be some type of vegetation or bushes or wood in that pocket, but that's going to be where every bass in that creek at least tries to spawn is in that pocket because it's flat, it's going to have cover, and it's protected from runoff and turbulent water. All right. Is that the last one, Mike? Okay. I think the same thing there. Same thing. All right. So you see where the river is coming in on this one? What I like about this one, river comes in and you see how that creek actually positions itself back the other way. So any kind of water that's coming into the system is going to kind of bypass right by that creek. It's going to make it the most stable water, even though that particular creek has a little bit of a ditch to it, which means it will be a little bit more unstable than the last one I showed you. The fact that it's positioned parallel with the creek and it's south facing still makes it a place that's going to be the most stable in close proximity to that creek. Anytime you have a creek, there's going to be a population of fish that lives there, and you can just want to look for the highest percentage place in that proximity. That's probably where those fish are going to spawn. So I like that creek for those that little pocket for those reasons. And this is just me zooming out on the same area. Actually, no, that's actually a scrub shot there. So I thought that was zoom out. That was one I didn't fix it. I would have blown it up. I think that's probably the last one, isn't it?
That is the last one.
That was a scrub one. I just messed up on that. Okay, so let's see. I did have a couple rods to show y'all some baits, but let's do this. We need to do that in the next live. Don't know you're on that. But listen, I've done enough of these to know that an hour and a half in, y'all ain't paying attention. Y'all done went to bed. Y'all done ate 2 hamburgers and watching whatever y'all watch on Netflix by now. I did have some baits out here to talk about fishing during the spawn. We'll jump to that on the next live for catching fish that are spawning on the bed. We'll talk about that then. Let's see. I'm gonna catch up on any questions that that you might have here, and then we'll shut her down for the night. We need to talk. I'm gonna try to get Brennan, the guy that won a straight up fishing championship, to come and do a live with me for the Ask B Lab. We're gonna answer these questions together. So
I've got 6 or 7 questions.
okay, what you got?
All right.
We'll burn through them real quick.
The tidal fisheries, when water fluctuates 2 to 5 feet, where are they laying their eggs to get adequate sunlight to incubate?
You know what's wild is, and I've only got to fish. I fished 2 places during the spawn on tidal fisheries. So we caught the very tail end of spawn on the Potomac one time when I went in 2017. We still went in like the end of May, early June, but we caught the tail end of the spawn there. And to my surprise, the fish didn't really move that far. We still caught them in the same places we always catch them. Belmont Bay. That particular year, Piscataway Creek played. They caught them in the Potomac River, the Potomac Creek, and they caught them in Aquia. Same places that they catch them every year. And they also caught them on the Greenway Flats. So if you don't live on the Potomac, none of that what I just said means anything to you. This is what I do know about tidal fisheries. They spawn on the flats closer to the main lake because those flats on the main lake, they can stay deep. The bass know where the breach is, how deep they can go and still have water at low tide on tidal fisheries. So in my experience, this really pretty much in the same places on flats, everything that I just said. But if you got a 5 foot tide swing, they're going to be right there at that 5 foot mark. 4.5, 5 foot mark is where they're going to be, where they're going to lay the eggs. Now, I don't know if this was Ken. Was that Ken asking that question? Or was this someone else asking that one?
Mac Toon.
Mac Toon. Now, Ken would have way more experience fishing for during the spawn on tidal fisheries. I'd love to hear what Ken's experience on that because we always end up going there after the spawn. So I've never really caught it. Other place I've done that is the Cooper River here in South Carolina. I did that as a warm up one time before we went to the Potomac. But they just got in the holes. They went as far as just like saltwater fishing. They went in the creeks as far back as you could go on low tide and still be water is where they would spawn. Any kind of wood, any kind of grass edge, they were right on that stuff. So predictable, it wasn't even funny. In my experience, that was the most predictable spawn that I've ever fished. What's the next one?
All right. How do you find the deeper beds?
How do you find the deeper beds? So you take the knowledge of everything we just talked about and you apply that. Everything we just talked about, you're just not seeing those beds. So we know that the fish are going to spawn around islands. We know they're going to fish around points. And so we take our Carolina rigs, we take our football jigs, whatever you like to fish a little deeper, the 8, 10, 12 foot, and we just cast them deeper. You just did that. If you went to Lake Russell, that's what we were fishing for. Those fish that you were catching at Lake Russell were spawning, whether you knew it or not. And so this is not something where you just say, oh, they're spawning right there. You're going to fan cast on all of these shallow flats. You're going to fan cast. Everything we just talked about is how you find those deeper bass that are spawning. And you know where they spawn. They spawn where? Main lake points, shallow pockets, shallow main lake flats, shoals, reefs. That's where they're going to spawn at. And so you're going to just position yourself to use lures that get a little deeper where you can't see the bottom, 5, 6, 7, whatever the depth is in your body of water, right where you just about can't see the bottom is a good place for you to throw those baits. So anywhere you just about can't see the bottom, near all of those areas that we've talked about for the last hour and a half, shoals, reefs, flat points, main lake flats, shallow main lake bars, ledges, that's where you're going to fish. That's where you're going to catch those.
All right. In the spawn, do the larger fish tend to be deeper, or does it not?
I would say so. Yeah. Yeah. During the spawn, I would certainly say that your bigger fish are probably going to be deeper. I would also say that your bigger fish spawn first. I would also say that your bigger fish spawn fastest, quickest, in and out, right out next day. It's a big fish. They got to eat. They can't be romancing around. In my experience, early on is when I always see the biggest ones. Early on, and then way later on, when nobody's thinking about it, is when you see the biggest, nastiest heifers laying around ever.
All right.
A heifer's just a cow. Okay, don't y'all trip.
On the flats with no actual structure in dirty water, what bait choice are you using to cover water? Open flats would take all day dragging a worm.
Yep, I was drag Carolina rig. Carolina rig can cover waters extremely fast. That's the beauty of the Carolina rig. The reason that I use the Carolina rig instead of the shaky head and it's been more productive for me this year is because the fish have been a little deeper because the water's clear. Now, other plus side is that when I throw a 1/2 ounce Carolina rig out there, bloop, bloop, throw it out there, hit the bottom, it stays on the bottom. Where shaky head, I pull it a little bit and it comes off the bottom 5 foot. You pull a bit, it comes off the bottom 6 foot. And you got to wait for it to go back down to the bottom. And these fish are not going to bite unless the bait's on the bottom. So Carolina rig is going to be number 1 because of bottom contact. Number 2, in some situations in stained water, chatterbait, I don't know what it is. Something about the way it moves water, bass they can't stand that. Secondly, in stained water situations, top waters, frogs, prop baits. In Florida, that's probably one of my favorite baits to throw when they're spawning is a prop bait or a frog. A lot of times when you got lily pads, sometimes vegetation, it won't be necessarily stained water, but it's going to be dark water. And so top waters are good. And we're actually going to have a little session drop, I think Wednesday or someday this week, on some springtime top waters that you can use. And some of these are in the context of fish actually spawning. Something we don't talk about very often because not a lot of us live in areas where you get spawning in top water temperatures at the same time. Florida is one of those areas that you do. But to your point, my number 1 is going to be a Carolina rig. I do like a chatterbait that you are able to cover water with that really fast. But anything that I can drag on a drop shot, I use that there. We fished Lake Eufaula in Oklahoma 2 years ago, and it was stained. Most of the guys caught them cranking with square and Carolina rig in between docks. Stained water. It's just one of those things. It's just hard. What can you throw on the bottom and it stay there so you can catch the fish? And it costs enough commotion. I'll just change my base to like the gremlin or lizard versus the worm, like what I've been using. But it works. It works good. You can cover water with that pretty fast. Don't think like just dragging a worm isn't as slow as what you think it is. Not as slow as what you think. But I'm still not going to go to a lot of reaction baits to cover water because the fish is, listen, why in the spring you really shouldn't be that worried about covering water because the fish are very predictable where they are. I'll just tell you exactly where the fish are going to be so you can go to those areas and slow down. So like if you're trying to speed up in the spring, is usually the wrong thing to do. Usually, generally speaking. Okay. What we got next?
All right. Are you targeting shade at all or open sunbanks?
I'm not even factoring that in at all. When it comes to fishing during the spawn, I'm not thinking about shade. I'm not thinking about sun. I'm not thinking about any of that. It has nothing to do because it moves throughout the day. So these fish are going somewhere they're going to stay. So at some point, there's going to be sun. At some point, there's going to be shade for most of the places. So it's not even in my spectrum. It's not even in my scope. I'm not thinking about shade. I'm not thinking about sun. It's not even in my peripheral. It's the last thing I'm worried about. Where is it shallow? Where is it dead end? And where is that shallow water in correlation to the main lake or the pockets? That's all I'm working. I wouldn't worry about things shade. And I wouldn't too far into the weeds, I would say. It's a factor that you don't have control over, and you can't duplicate that throughout the lake. As we get into the post spawn, that is something that could factor in. But at this period, talking about the context of the spawn, it's not a factor.
All right. If Florida was your home water, would you stay shallow pretty much year round, hitting the same points and flats you would during the spawn? Most of my fishing is in the shallow water.
So, in the context of Florida, if you live in Florida, it's a good bet that your fish are going to be shallow. You got a shallow body of water you're fishing anyway. Everything in Florida is long and drawn out. I have fished Lake Toho in July and literally caught them in the same place that where we fished when I was there like a month ago. There's no seasons. So migrations aren't as drastic or almost don't exist. The fact that there's no seasons and there's very little change in the water and in the environment that the fish live in, they don't really do anything different for the most part. So where I would fish like right now in Florida probably wouldn't look that different for the next 3 months. Even the baits probably wouldn't look that different. You're going to be Florida's just a 1 to 4 foot deal. Now, there's a lot of variation in that 1 to 4 foot because you can fish 1 to 4 foot out in the middle of nowhere in hydrilla. You can fish 1 to 4 foot around tules, round reeds, flat reeds, sometimes even bushes, lily pads, spatted dock. There's a lot of different context of 1 to 4 foot. But I think I would move in and out during the season, but still stay in that 1 to 4 foot range. That seems like that's just a sweet spot for me. And really like 1 to 3, but 4, when you get over about 6 foot, it's like, whoa, what are we doing here? But if you ask me, I would just stay where my rod tip could touch the bottom all year long. I don't think I've ever caught a bass in Florida that's deeper than where I couldn't touch the bottom with my rod tip. Ever. I
All
think
right.
I answered this question, but stay shallow, boy.
Last one. How much would the water fluctuations affect the spawn?
Oh yeah. So water fluctuations do affect the spawn drastically, and more so on some lakes. There's some lakes that the bass will not spawn until the water gets to a certain level. They will hold them eggs forever. The Kentucky lakes, the Tennessee rivers, Coosa rivers, those fish, it's something in them. I almost like they have this some kind of gene in them that will hold their eggs. They will not spawn until the water gets in the bushes. And so if you live in a place where there's a lot of wood, if you live somewhere where there's like swampy areas, they may wait until the water gets to a certain level to really do it good, to really spawn well. Now, for us, like in the Carolinas, and if you fish reservoirs, it's not much of a factor. Um, it helps when you have higher water because the fry have more habitat to live around once they hatch. But generally speaking, on most reservoirs, water height is not going to really matter that much. It's not going to have much effect on what you do, where you go. Um, it's just the spawn tends to be better. They tend to survive better on high water situations. But outside of the Tennessee River, maybe even like which Douglas Lake is Tennessee River, outside of these lakes where you get those giant fluctuations in water, I don't think it matters that much. I'd love to hear what somebody else that actually has more experience on some of these bodies of water to hear what their take on that particular subject. But generally speaking, unless it's Tennessee River or a place where the water fluctuates a lot, water height is not going to matter that much. It's number one, water temperature. I would say no. Number one is going to be day length. Number two would be water temperature. Um, and then everything else. Those are things I would give my energy to. Day length, water temperature, and then let everything else fall beneath that. All right, y'all. That was a long lesson. That's one of the longest ones I had in a while. going on 2 hours. That means we had some good questions there at the end. Our next live is next Monday when I'm at Smith Lake. I'm actually fishing our next tackle warehouse tournament at Smith Lake. So I'll be practicing Friday. I usually do a live on Friday. I'll be practicing Friday. Make sure y'all tune into the community roundtable that we'll have on Wednesdays. Those have been some of the most productive conversations in this app is the ones that are led by you, the subscribers. That's where you can share, you can talk. It's not just me talking. You can share, you can talk, and you're learning from other anglers within inside the community. So make sure you tune in that. I think it's at 8 o'clock on Wednesday as well. Appreciate y'all. In the community section, throw them in the Ask B-Lad if you have questions about anything that popped up in the live tonight. Yeah.
See you guys.
I'm out of here. See ya.